Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Brown from Mirae Securities, Mirae Live. Joining us this morning is Mr. Stephen Higgins, the Head of Institutional Capital for Cushman Wakefield. Stephen, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks Stephen, for having me.
Now, Cushman is regarded worldwide as a commercial and industrial property specialist advisor, founded in Chicago, and its market cap is about 4.6 billion US. 50,000 employees worldwide. You're celebrating 15 years in Vietnam. And we've read in recent months, Cushman hiring multiple industry experts such as yourself, headhunted from one of the large rivals here. And can you explain a little bit, therefore, about where you see the Cushman Vietnam strategy for this year and moving forward?
Yeah, definitely, Stephen. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. I think, look, Cushman from a global perspective is, as you said, it's a listed US company, has quite a large revenue of about 7.8 billion per year, has about 50,000 employees and exists in about 60 countries. And in particular, Asia is obviously a big sort of growth market for us. Specifically, in particular, Vietnam. There's obviously a huge role for an international advisory firm for Cushman here, and we've been here for 15 years, as you said. I think being in this market, one of the big parts of our business plan is an emphasis on localization. There's a huge growth in the market with local companies listed, also local developers. So our business is really trying to sort of help cater to these. Obviously the foreign groups as well, but obviously with the local market.
Okay. Now, you've been in Vietnam for about 6 years, and you've also, preceding that, you've been in Singapore, working in the capital markets there and real estate investment transactions. Can you outline the types of business deals you'll be driving your team and focusing on in Vietnam?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Vietnam, obviously there's more and more, there's a higher rate of volume of transactions each year. So we are seeing that the market grow and more capital coming into the market. I think the sectors that we're looking at are the key growth sectors, which is institutional capital coming to the residential sector, industrial sector, office and retail. So these are key sectors that we're working on. Out of that, specifically what we're working on is working with local groups, obviously on sell side appointments. That's direct and indirect real estate transactions, as well as capital raising. Obviously, it's a development market. There's a lot of growth opportunities, so there's an emphasis of a need for capital in the market, but also with foreign groups as well. There's a lot of foreign capital trying to come into the market. So we obviously advise a lot of these investors, but also once the foreign capital comes in, then they need to divest and exit at some point. So there's a sell side role there.
That leads me into my next question. From which countries do you see the majority of interest historically and developing? Our company, I also invest in real estate in Vietnam, and there's a lot of our Korean institutional clients who invest and have interest in real estate in Vietnam. Where else do you see it coming from?
Yeah, definitely. What we see, particularly, is that there's a big amount of capital coming from Asia. So obviously North Asia, we look at the markets, as you said, Korea, Japan, a lot of institutional capital coming from there into the real estate sector. We look at Hong Kong. There's a lot of capital from Hong Kong, and we look at Southeast Asia, Singapore. So there's a lot of institutional capital comes here, including we see a lot of the listed developers, CapitaLand, Keppel, Mapletree. A lot of these groups have been in Vietnam from the early days, as well as a lot of the opportunistic fund management capital and private equity as well.
Okay, and staying on institutional capital investing, in regard to Vietnam real estate. How do you see this evolving, whether it be in the direct investor, corporate investor, or through funds or institutional developers?
Yeah, exactly. So I think if we look at the investment landscape in Vietnam, if we look at the FDI, well, last year there was around about $2.7 billion of FDI coming in specifically to real estate. Which, to be honest, was a little bit lower than recent years. Obviously, we had the COVID situation and some IPOs and various other things which inflated potentially the FDI in previous years. So out of that, say, to 2.7 billion, there will be residential is the main sector that where probably a lot of probably more than 50% of that capital goes to. And also a lot of the capital is invested through convertible bond or international convertible bonds. And then, so outside of that, we obviously are seeing a lot of direct, indirect investment into residential through cap raising joint ventures. And then obviously the other asset classes have been more active, like in industrial, we've seen a lot of sector-focused funds being raised. Similar with retail, obviously with Lotte, with Aon, with Vincom. So there has been a lot of interest throughout those sectors.
Okay, and we understand that Vietnam is a very organised nation in terms of master planning their industrial parks, their mega projects, whether it be Binh Nhung province, the Vietnam-Singapore Industrial Park, or the new economic zone that's been announced this year on the Chinese border in Thang province. Give us a little bit of enlightenment in this space as well for potential investors in Vietnam.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously the topic of industrial has captured the headlines in Vietnam, particularly over the last 3 years. When we look at the total industrial landscape, so there's about 400 industrial parks in Vietnam existing, and obviously that number is going to increase. And overall, on a scale basis, there's about 120,000 hectares of industrial space. When we look at industrial, we obviously look at manufacturing as well as logistics. And on that overall space, there's probably somewhere between 10 to 15%, which is allocated to logistics, and the rest is manufacturing. It has been an asset class that has, it is quite well organised, as you said. These industrial parks are 200 hectares to 500 hectares. There's quite clear town planning in terms of what the development parameters are, how the process to get construction permits, and they're quite well organised in terms of issuing their investment certificates, which is one of the key sort of parts of the planning process as well.
Sure, and a main incentive for a relocating FDI investor to contemplate. Our head of research, he thinks the economic zone Thang Nguyen province will prove an ideal opportunity environment for Chinese companies in particular relocating, and also international ones who want to service southern China and also the capital of Hanoi. The next topic, therefore, is logistics, because that's a growing subsector within the industrial space that you're operating in. Huge amount of investor interest in that. Some investment and ownership controls, with logistics are in place in Vietnam. So where are the opportunities in logistics in Vietnam?
Yeah, definitely. Look, the logistics sector has been it's a rapidly expanding sector. It has been doing so for the past 3 to 5 years. What we've seen is, like on a scale basis, there's about 4.7 million square meters of logistics warehousing throughout Vietnam, and there's probably about another 700,000 that's currently under construction. So it's expanding. If we look at the demand side, there's probably about 1.2 million square meters of active inquiries that are unsatisfied at the moment. And if we look at the occupier profile, these are in the third-party logistics sector. They're in the e-commerce sector, which is rapidly expanding. Obviously, the middle class is expanding, the consumption's expanding. So we're seeing big growth through 3PL and e-commerce. So the occupier side's been very strong. And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of foreign investors come to Vietnam over the last 3 to 5 years, which obviously started with the private equity capital. Obviously, we see Warburg Pincus, we see Goldman Sachs, and then as an interesting market maturity in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot more sort of specific industrial fund managers come to the market, such as Logos, ESR, GLPs, and launching funds. And as a result of this, we've seen probably around $3 billion of equity raised for logistics strategies in Vietnam.
Sure, and even some Korean companies like CJ, they came in and partnered with Gemadep. CJ Logistics was one of the acquisitions they divested from Gemadep for them to start up as well. Any lessons from the region in that area before we move on from logistics, China or anywhere else?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question. there's certainly been a lot of lessons learned from China, and that these are lessons that will help the market move very quickly. So these lessons are from investors that have gone to China. They've built warehousing, they've built products there. They've seen the growth and the scale in which the manufacturing segment has evolved, as well as the logistics segment, particularly through the 3PL and the e-commerce. So there's been a lot of lessons from that will be transferred to Vietnam, particularly with construction contractors, with sources of finance. So we really see the benefits of this with these investors and occupiers being able to move very quickly.
Yep. Now, our real estate analysts and clients have also seen accelerating growth in manufacturing, FDI allocated to this sector. We've had recent news of the Lego factory going to be set up in the Vietnam-Singapore Industrial Park. I think that's about $1 billion capex on that one, due to be operational within just a couple of years from now as well. Give us some insight into the sector types of occupiers, excluding Lego, which we've touched on, and where they're primarily relocating from, and where in Vietnam are they going?
Yeah, definitely. Like this is a great question. I think look throughout Vietnam has been very active in the manufacturing segment, obviously for the last 15-20 years. It's been in more recent years where there has been a huge trend towards higher value chain manufacturing. We've seen that go into to computers, electronics, optical products. So we've seen a lot of household names such as Samsung. Obviously, Samsung, one of the biggest companies in the world, Foxconn, LG, and a lot of other high-tech manufacturers from North Asia, such as Taiwan and Korea. So there's been a huge influx of these groups, and they're spending some substantial amounts of capital, which are generating huge parts of the economy. So in terms of location, a lot of it's been around North Vietnam, Bac Ninh, Bac Giang, Haiphong, and around sort of the Hanoi area.
Okay, and next question that relates to that, land price movements. How are they going for all the people who want to relocate to an industrial park, and the listed companies who are saying that they're going to get in more and more into industrial parks like Novaland? How's the outlook for the land price?
Well, the land price situation in Vietnam it's a very interesting topic across multiple sectors. But specifically on industrial, it's really dependent on the area and the scarcity of land. But really, we have seen price growth increase within the range of, say, 10 to 30% or even 35%. So I guess percentages at the upper end of that range have been land that's in close proximity to major cities, being Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, with, say, within an hour and a half distance of the city, where you have locations which have such a high demand from occupiers. So, as such, the land price has grown a lot because you've got a lot of capital that wants to go in there, acquire these sites, given that there's such high conviction around sort of the end takeout user, and obviously the value of the asset.
Sure. And moving on to the overall Vietnam property development space, the second tier city phenomenon, the coastal town projects growth story. Your take and opinion on some of those types of opportunities, and the players who have basically also been looking at raising capital, such as on the Singapore Stock Exchange for convertible bonds, Novaland being one, Vingroup another. That space?
Yeah, definitely. The second to third tier cities as investment geographies has been a rapid sort of change in the past 3 years. There's been a few sort of forces that have been influencing this. One of the key forces has been land scarcity in some of the major cities. So where developers have wanted to do residential projects, commercial projects in the Hanoi, the Ho Chi Minh City, land supply potentially has been reduced. So and also land prices have increased. So they have, and obviously we have seen expansion in the middle class, and with the urbanisation. Locations outside of the major cities, which haven't typically stacked up from a feasibility perspective, are now stacking up. And also, when we do find projects in the city, because they are very competitive, the prices are very high, and sometimes the end revenue prices aren't accelerating at the same speed as the land entry price. So we're seeing a contracting, return metrics. So that the opportunistic investors are searching for higher risk-adjusted returns.
And there's an increasing sophistication in the overall real estate scene, development space, willingness of international investors to strategically partner with locals so they can deliver an iconic project, such as Swire and Keppel partnering with a long-standing local, Gorenpe Capital, to help develop the Tutium project in District 2. Your take on this style of investing, rather than foreigners doing it themselves or trying to do it themselves? Do you think it's the smarter, more strategic approach to partner with a good local?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great method to market entry from the foreign capital, and it has been the preferred method to come to the market, and I think that trend will continue. Obviously, the local groups here, have evolved, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated as we go on. So they play an excellent role as a partner, and obviously can help with finding the right sites, and obviously the permitting and the legal sides as well.
They know it all. Yeah. To wrap things up, there's been a lot of activity around new economy style asset classes in APAC and Vietnam. Data centers being one. The demand for that in Vietnam as a sector and asset class, and others, your take?
Yeah, definitely. I think the data centers globally, obviously, there's a huge trend towards digital economies, which is data intensive. So there's a rapid demand and need for data centers globally. And we are seeing this trend continue in Vietnam, where it is an advanced economy. There is a high level of data needed as well. And obviously other regulation changes that are happening around banking and various other sectors that will contribute to this as well. So at the moment we have seen, especially over the last 12 months to 36 months, a huge growth in demand from data center operators, given that there are the end consumers that need this product. So we are seeing that. So this will be a sector certainly to watch. At the moment, though, with obviously there's probably still a bit of fine tuning to do with the government regulation around this sector, privacy issues, and some of these other things. But certainly from the investor perspective, which is where I guess Cushman Wakefield comes into it, there's a huge amount of dry powder that's lining up to jump into this sector, particularly Vietnam as well. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think the government wants to localize the data that's collected from their citizens when they're doing e-commerce transactions. So given that there's nearly 100 million of them, they're going to need a lot of space to create their data center storage facilities. Just lastly, you've been here for quite some time. What's your take on the outlook now for Vietnam expanding into ASEAN and also into Australia for Vietnamese property companies? They've got the capacity now to invest abroad. Vinamilk's opening factories overseas. Does Cushman get an increasing amount of interest from the local Vietnamese companies thinking of expanding to Singapore, or like Mobile World Group's announced it's going to open up through a JV in Southeast Asia now with an Indonesian company? Are you getting more and more communication like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is very exciting, especially with in the real estate sector. We have seen a growing amount of outbound capital investment. You mentioned markets like Australia, but also other markets like Singapore and Europe have also been key as well. So certainly we think that with a lot of these real estate companies that are expanding, they want to sort of internationalise. Obviously, we saw Vivaland last year acquire a building in Singapore, which was quite an interesting sort of transaction. More recently, we've seen Vingroup go into the US with the car program as well. So we are seeing these trends happening, and more Vietnamese listed developers looking to go offshore and have investment exposure in other markets.
Good, great. Okay then, Stephen Higgins, pleasure to have you in, and we'll have to definitely have you in again for an update toward the second half of this year. And to all the team at Cushman and Wakefield, every success on your 15th anniversary, and thank you for joining joining Mirae Asset Live.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephen.
Steve Brown from Mirae Asset Securities. Have a good morning.